Welcome back, everybody, to the Generational Archetypes series. So we have done the boomers, Gen X, and millennials, and now we are on to Gen Z. Okay, so Gen Z, the official kind of date of this is 1996 to 2012. Now, there's a few things interesting here that I want to discuss. Okay, so that I think are very particular to this generation. Each generation seems to have very interesting lore and context around them that we need to understand, right? So for the boomers, for instance, it was like they are the biggest generation. They were also one of the first generations where Pluto really had a massive influence, right? Because remember, Pluto wasn't discovered till 1930. And most of the boomers started to be born in the 40s. So Pluto was at its kind of height of his archetype coming in. We also talked about the context of how they grew up, right? Gen X, the context of how they grew up, right? And a lot of them having like heavy Libra placements, mixed with Uranus and Scorpio, which is like super intense. And then of course, millennials being the only generation who will ever exist that has Pluto in its ruling sign. Okay, and we also have a Capricorn stellium. So we have a uniqueness to us. Of course, also we were, I'd say, the first generation to grow up with mixed worlds of analog and digital. We were also the generation who grew up in some of the biggest tragedies. Most of us were young kids during 2000. Everybody was freaking out about the ending of the world, and there was the whole Y2K crisis, and then we grew up during 9/11, and then we were growing up during the 2008 housing crisis, and we saw lots of people losing their jobs and their houses and being homeless. And then 2012 was supposed to be the end of the world, and then we hit the pandemic, and it just goes on and on, right? Gen Z, starting in 1996, so for those of you who are familiar with information I've shared before about this, 1994 to 1996 was the Archon invasion. Cobra has detailed this extensively. Mom has talked about this extensively. Okay, what the Archon invasion was when, again, basically the overlords of the planet, so the original overlords who were the Anunnaki, which led into what we call the Illuminati, right? Just a lot of them actually did have the capacity to reintegrate to the light. And so these overlords kind of surrendered during this time to the light. So they were either recycled or reintegrated because they understood that there was nowhere to go from here. That the inevitability was that this planet would return to light and they would no longer be able to stay here anyways. Now, the ruling faction of these overlords, what we call the minions, who are what you see today, okay? They can be soulless beings. They could just be beings who have like sold their soul, or just they've lost their source essence over time, right? The minions who they put in place to be in physical bodies to control the planet, right? They refuse to surrender because they don't have the divine intelligence, even though the original overlords, we often talk about them in a very negative light, which of course, the Anunnaki are not saints by any means, but a lot of them did come from the light. Okay, they were originally part of source, so they could reintegrate. A lot of these minions and soulless beings don't have the intelligence. So they thought that they could retain the power here. It's kind of like when parents, leave the children to their own devices. That's kind of what happened. And so they went rogue. And they refused to surrender. And this is what led to the Archon invasion of 1994 to 1996, where they basically opened up all these dark portals and let in all of the archons, lower entities. Basically, they wanted to flood the planet with low vibrational entities in hopes that that would keep the planet in a low vibration, it would keep humanity enslaved, and they could retain their power. So Gen Z being born during the Archon invasion, 1996 to 2012, right? And 2012 was our original ascension timeline. And it was the year that many prophecies began to start manifesting. And it is also one of the key dates if you look at human design and Richard Rudd's work. They talk about the 3 different milestones of the ascension. The first was the harmonic convergence of 1987, okay, which was the millennial era. Then you have 2012. Finally, 2027. Okay, so Gen Z is kind of in this very potent time. And again, context is key. It could be why a lot of the, again, we look at the shadows and the light to every generational archetype. This is not, it's not to demean, it's not to shame, it's not good or bad. It is simply objective. There are just simply facts. And we, and as part of each generational blueprint, must be aware of the contract that we took on coming in with this oversoul group. We have our own personal contracts and we have our oversoul group contracts, right? So it's not good or bad, but they were born in the height of when the Archon invasion was happening and when a lot of darkness was flooding the planet. And so they have to be aware of that, right? Now, there's also another interesting thing here, okay? So, there's a lot of numerologists out there who have made very interesting observations that basically for 1,000 years, right, from the year 1000 AD to the year 2000, everyone born in that time, we all have a life path number, okay? We have a birthday number. These are important numerology things to look at if you're ever interested in doing that. Because it gives you insight as to your blueprint, okay? So all of us who were born in the 1900s, right, we have a 1 at the beginning of our birth year. Now, yes, we're all going to have different life paths. We're going to have different birth numbers, right? But overall, part of the frequency of that century had a 1 in front of it, which means, and I'm a life path 1, so I feel good speaking about this. 1 energy is about momentum. It's about initiative. It's about starting something new, right? Just think of the number 1, right? Everybody wants to be number 1. Everyone wants to be first, okay? There's a competition energy there for sure. And then there's this natural essence of wanting to start and create and initiate and lead. That is 1 energy. So if we look at that century from 1000 AD to 2000, what a leap in civilization. I mean, good, bad, and ugly, but we started a lot of shit, right? Again, good, bad, and ugly. We started a lot of shit. We initiated, we tried new things, we built new things. There was a lot of leadership, there was a lot of competition, okay? But that 1 energy is very core to a lot of our archetypes. Now, everyone born after 2000 carries a 2 in front of their year. And 2 energy is very different. 1 energy is masculine, okay? So even, feminine who are life path 1s like me, or you have a lot of, masculine energy. That is just the way it is. And that's another reason why we could probably see that the patriarchy was so dominant during that century, because the 1 energy is masculine. It is a little dominating, okay? It can be a little bit overpowering and overbearing and controlling, right? That these are shadows of the 1. The 2 is feminine. So it's another interesting thing that half of Gen Z, more than half, so not only were they being born during the height of the Archon invasion, a lot of them were also being born during this change in century. And so this is another reason why this generation in particular carries an entirely different signature. The 2 is feminine, remember that. So when there are lots of stereotypes about this generation, again, sometimes stereotypes are true, and we need to be like honest about that, right? Like all the stereotypical jokes about all the generations, a lot of them are true. And if we stop taking them so personally, we might actually be able to get somewhere, right? Well, this generation, a lot of people say certain stereotypes about them, right? One is that they're overly sensitive. Well, that comes from most of their birth years are led by the number 2. 2 is sensitivity. 2 is feminine. 2 is about the mirror. 2 is about relationship, union. Okay? It is highly sensitive. Okay? They also say that this, particularly Gen Z, which we will get to their archetype, is extremely judgmental. There is a huge rise within that generation of, like I mentioned in the millennial video, of them being sober. I think good for them, right? Good on ya. Millennials, we don't carry that gene. We are the extremists. We are the obsessive ones. We are the ones who take things a little bit too far, and that includes our partying. Gen Z went the opposite direction. Okay, the 2 is more introverted as well. 1s are more extroverted. So there's that also. A lot of them feel very lonely. They feel disconnected. So I think that can also play into it. But a lot of them, the stereotype is that they can be very judgmental, very opinionated. And I think, again, we have to understand there's a completely different energy signature to all the children born after the year 2000. They carry a much more feminine energy than the 1s. Okay, so let's start off with Pluto. Okay, so obviously Pluto's our big marker here. So Pluto, for this generation, most of them have Pluto in Sagittarius, like 95% of them. So that's going to run from 1995 to 2008. Okay, so 95% here of Gen Z has Pluto in Sagittarius. Okay, now this is one of the reasons why they're so opinionated. Again, when we look at the Pluto placements of the generation, this is the ego death work that each generation must do. Remember, we called Pluto in. We fucking named him Lord of the Underworld, okay? Like, we asked for this. We asked for this ego death, for this deep transformation of the shadows of humanity. We asked for this. Now, again, it's interesting that Pluto's influence will wane completely by 2036. So my feeling, possibly, is that post 2036, when Pluto's influence has waned, and again, we will still use him astrologically, but his influence won't be the same because we have chosen to demote him. We have chosen for that influence to wane out at some point. Could it be that after 2036, we no longer require such extensive ego death? That's my hope. My hope is that then by that point, hopefully there's very little ego left on the planet. We don't require such harsh lessons and death and rebirth because hopefully we're in a much more aligned place. And maybe children born after 2036, not having the influence of Pluto, come in with less ego, less shadows. It's possible. It's one of my theories. But Sagittarius, in its deep shadow, turns faith, because Sagittarius is full of faith, full of optimism. Okay, they deeply trust in the process of life. They deeply trust in the universe. They are also the seekers of knowledge and wisdom. Okay, they are adventurous. They are spontaneous. They are also truth seekers and truth speakers. They are fire signs. Now, in the shadow of that, faith becomes religion. It becomes an institution. It becomes a belief system in which you now have to police everybody around you to make them believe what you believe. Okay, think of a preacher, or think of people who go out and try to convert people to a certain religion, let's say, right? Like they want, you need to be saved by Jesus, or, you need to convert to Judaism, or, you know, whatever the case may be, that convert style of energy is the shadow of Sagittarius. It's preachy. It's judgy. It wants everybody to do what they think is best because it's their belief system. This is what Gen Z carries. This is why they say the things they do, and they do the things they do, is because they have very strong opinions and they think that everybody needs to follow their opinions. Okay. There's also kind of a stereotype that they're kind of Puritans in a way. Like, again, they're, you know, it's not good or bad. It's just an observation. That they're very into like being sober. They don't socialize and go out as much as the previous generations do. They actually are much more isolated. They're much more on the internet, right? That's just how they grew up. And that they do have a huge kind of purity culture. They can be very judgmental about what people wear, and that's why they're known for wearing baggy jeans and t-shirts, like showing no skin, you know, being very modest, if you will. Purity culture is a shadow of Sagittarius. So I think also them being super opinionated while having very little wisdom and very little life experience is also the shadow of Pluto and Sagittarius. Okay, it just is what it is. We all have the shadows. That's what they have to deal with. Now, the highest for these, I say kids, they're not kids. A lot of them are fully grown adults now, or most of them. And so the youngest ones, they're born in 2012, are still, in the late teens, but they're coming to the age of adulthood, right? And so I think the highest for these generations here, and the kids in this generation, is to actually go out and experience the world, to take a disconnect from learning strictly on the internet or from learning strictly through videos or anything digital, and to truly go out into the world and experience it, to make mistakes, to fuck up, to learn. Okay, this generation can be fantastic in terms of actually being great guides and wisdom bringers to the world, and also revolutionizing our belief systems and how we think about things. They can really bring a new sense of adventure and wonder to the world of like, hey guys, it doesn't need to be this serious. Maybe we could just have fun. Maybe we could all just learn together. Maybe we can be more optimistic. You know, maybe we could shoot for the stars. Sagittarius is very idealistic. I think they can revolutionize what it means to have faith, what it means to believe in something. But in order for them to do that, they have to go out into the world and gain real life experience and wisdom. They are not going to get it from behind a screen. They're not going to get it from college. They're not going to get it from watching videos. They have to live it. And the second that clicks for them and they start embracing that, they will be an incredible force to be reckoned with. But unfortunately, this is where it is now. I think, again, a lot of them were in late teens / very early 20s during the pandemic. Okay, and again, context is key. So a lot of them, their college experiences or their life experiences, that is like the prime age for life experience, right? I mean, I'm just going off my life experience. I'm sure many of you. Core life experiences happen between 16 and 25. You make a ton of mistakes. You do a lot of things that you wish you never did, but you learn so much. And it's the time where you expand, you know, you learn new things, you meet new people. A lot of that was taken from them. And so again, this is where kind of, unfortunately, it destroyed a lot of their opportunities for these experiences. So I think that they need to take that into their own hands. Now, the much later part of this generation, from 2008 to 2012, so those 4 years, have Pluto in Capricorn. Okay, so this subset here is going to have the good, the bad, and the ugly, the shadow of Capricorn. Okay, and the shadow of Capricorn is materialism. I remember years ago there was videos like on social media circulating of like young kids who would have fallen into this category, been about that age, right? Who have grown up, okay? They were growing up during this time, 2008 to 2012, where everything was about materialism. And again, this was the height of the housing market collapse. But you had a strange dichotomy, a strange gap, just like we see now in terms of wealth. There was a huge gap at that time where there was tons of people going to foreclosure, losing their homes, losing their jobs. And then you had a subset of people, elites, corporations, who made record profits. Okay, this is how it always is. And there was this huge push towards materialism. And again, one of the reasons, by the way, why the 2008 market collapse happened. Because remember, leading up to 2008, Pluto was in Sagittarius. Okay. And at that point, leading up to 2008, like people were spending beyond their means. That is Sagittarius. Sagittarius is living on a whim and a prayer and a good time, but they're not necessarily financially responsible. It's not their strong suit. Okay. Everyone was living beyond their means. People who had no business owning these massive homes, but they were getting approved for mortgages because they were just selling subpar mortgage bonds. Anyway, so that subset had started to grow up in the Pluto and Capricorn era, where they saw it was all about consumerism. It was all about materialism. It was all about looking and giving the impression of being powerful, of being elite. So think name brands, big houses, job titles, right? This was a lot of where the Pluto and Capricorn era really started to pull us into. And so that small subset, they are going to have to deal with the good, the bad, and the ugly of that. They're going to have to realize that actually, if you do want to be successful, you actually have to work hard. So one of the shadows of Capricorn, ironically, no one really ever talks about this because Capricorn's ruled by Saturn. So it's always known as like the workhorses, which in many ways is true. Capricorn is kind of relentless in its perseverance to succeed, right? And that can lead to like workaholism, being obsessed with success while kind of disregarding the emotional fulfillment of life and family and friends, and just kind of tunnel visioned. But the shadow of Capricorn is wanting to succeed with the least amount of work. It's wanting to get to the top of that mountain without actually putting in the grunt work and going through the initiations. It's wanting the easy way out. They're going to have to deal with that. That's the contract they're going to have to take on. That laziness isn't going to get you there. You can't give up at the first sign of a challenge. You will have to learn perseverance. You will have to transform addiction to materialism, addiction to power, addiction to authority, right? Now, also, again, in the higher, this particular subset here will be revolutionary in eventually becoming leaders in our systems and structures, and probably working with millennials in many ways to restructure how we operate in society, right? Politics, institutions, rules, regulations. In many ways, we're going to have to reform all of that. And this subset can really help do that because they're going to go through the death and rebirth process around the Capricorn energy and realize what it really means to lead, to realize what it really means to have authority, right? And to work hard and have that grit and have that perseverance to where you are a master and you have lots of wisdom to share. Okay, now the first 2 years, 1996 to 1998 group, they also have Neptune and Capricorn, which they share with millennials. So just that 2-year group, they're going to carry the similar things as us, where we had to learn the hard way about our disillusionment about the world. That hard work doesn't always lead to the outcome you want. Again, we were pushed into college, graduate school, doing internships for free, doing grunt work for free, basically taking the bottom of the barrel, and that success would eventually come later. And we realized after a decade that that was not true, that working hard doesn't always lead to more success because the system is rigged. And to also, again, to have the rose-colored glasses taken off about idolizing, moving up the corporate ladder and wanting to reach this height of what we view as success. And I think we had to reckon with that disillusionment of like, at what cost, right? At what cost? And will I really feel fulfilled by this, right? Of the status and the money and the power and the titles. Is that really going to fulfill me spiritually? And so this subset has that exact placement. And that's something that they learned as well early on, because they are, very much similar in age to the millennials. Now, the majority of Gen Z, 1998 to 2012, has Neptune in Aquarius. So Neptune did enter Pisces in 2011 and then retrograded back. So some of you who are born between 2011 and 2012 could possibly have Neptune in Pisces. But most of you are going to have Neptune in Aquarius. So where is your disillusionment going to come into? Technology. It will become very clear that technology can be harmful. That, like for instance, a lot of Gen Zs have made it big on the internet. Right? They've become successful, made a lot of money, got huge followings, etc. The disillusionment will break eventually, because people will come to the conclusion that they are essentially putting on a facade for the internet, but they're not fulfilled by their real life. That the internet cannot replace true spiritual connection, human connection, and emotional connection. And again, Neptune can lead to addictions. Right? So every generation has to move through their own addictions to really get to the beauty of Neptune, which is about using your spiritual gifts, your intuitive senses, and bring a new vision to the world. But first, you've got to move through the delusion. You've got to move through the addictions. So their addiction to technology and their delusion around it will be broken. But then they will be able to bring a new vision for humanity, about what community could really be, about how technology could be used in the future in a beneficial way, because they've seen the illusion of it. They've seen, the worst case scenario, and they can be incredibly creative and inventive as to what technology is actually beneficial for us in the future, and their idealness of how that's going to benefit humanity. So that group is going to be really key with technology and innovation. Now, if you are born between 2011 and 2012, and you were born during that brief period where Neptune dipped into Pisces, I will cover that extensively in the Gen Alpha video, but that's going to be a completely different vibe. So the addiction there, the delusion, the confusion there is going to be around your spirituality. There is going to be a lot of work that needs to be done around seeing reality for what it is and using imagination in a very creative but rooted way. Whereas the real shadow of Neptune in Pisces, there's a complete disconnect from reality. It's living in an alternate reality that isn't actually real. There's no translation to the material realm. So this can lead to psychosis. This can lead to a heavy addiction to substances or escapism. Basically, Pisces is any type of escapism. So this could be like addiction to video games or fantasy novels or movies or, whatever, or substances. Like it's an escape from reality because reality feels harsh to deal with. But Neptune in Pisces has an incredible creative imagination. And if that can be harnessed in a rooted and grounded way, those are the mystics of the future. But there's a lot of spiritual work that has to be done with that particular group. Okay, moving on to the Uranus placements. So from 1996 to 2003, Uranus was in Aquarius. So if you were born between 1996 and 2003, you would pretty much have Uranus in Aquarius, Neptune in Aquarius, and Pluto in Sagittarius. Okay, so Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius. So it is very strong here, similar to how millennials have Pluto in Scorpio, which is its ruling planet. So this is particularly strong. So again, this is why this generation has such an interest and kind of has grown up in a world that is very technology and social media focused, which are ruled by Aquarius. So they find very creative and inventive ways to use the internet. Again, like I've said, the art of the influencer, that was built by Gen Z. Like the internet itself and how the internet was used, that was millennials. We were the original internet users. MySpace, AIM, BBM, which later led to Instagram, which didn't come out till I was like 22. Instagram, right? Things of that nature. So AOL, like we were the original internet. And I would say what the internet is now is a lot more Gen Z influence. So the idea of influencer culture, the idea of streamers, the idea of getting paid to be online, the idea of putting your life online and getting paid for it. Like, yes, we millennials really started the YouTube era, but it wasn't like a job necessarily. You know what I mean? Like nobody was like a MySpace. Nobody's making money from MySpace. You know what I mean? Like when we first started using Facebook, I was 17, I think, 17 or 18. Yeah, you weren't getting paid from Facebook posts. Okay, like completely different era. So Gen Z has found creative and innovative ways to use the internet, to use social media, to use technology, right? And good on them. However, like we will see, because of that Neptune-Uranus conjunction in Aquarius, there will be sudden shifts in how they use technology. Certain delusions around technology and social media will become apparent and they will pivot. But these are real creators of the future, and I think they are real creators of bringing unique and different perspectives to the world. The issue is the Pluto in Sag. That is the main issue because it lacks experience. It lacks real wisdom and knowledge. So the danger of that is then using technology and creativity and ideas and innovations in a way that lacks any wisdom or maturity. Again, for instance, like I just use the influencer thing because it's the easiest analogy for me. A lot of these kids who started making money young, right, on social media, they're going to grow up and realize that they didn't actually gain any real world experience. They might have made a ton of money. They might have been super successful. Awesome, right? But their life lacks any real purpose. It lacks real wisdom. And again, this is where the stereotype comes in of like, I've seen lots of videos of like HR people or managers or owners of businesses, corporations, whatever, saying how Gen Z doesn't know how to do anything. They don't know how to write a resume. Not all of them, but maybe the younger ones. They don't know how to send like a PDF. There was a viral video going around of a girl who didn't understand what getting something notarized meant. And again, I'm not saying that knowing these things make you smarter. I don't think that that's true. But this is an example of it. There's a lack of wisdom. There's a lack of any real world experience. And so this is the generation that is going to be responsible for how do we take the internet and social media and technological innovation and things of that nature, and how do we somehow combine and balance that with real life, real world living. and that is their contract. Now, for those born between 2003 and 2010, you have Uranus in Pisces. And again, there might be a small portion of you that also have Neptune in Pisces, but it would be a very quick window, somewhere between 2011 and 2012. Uranus in Pisces, okay? Escapism tendencies, okay? Uranus in Pisces, there is an erraticness to perception. Uranus and Pisces can do a few great things. One is extremely imaginative. Okay, lean into your guys' creativity and imagination, please, but blend it with real life stuff, like real world experiences. Like, you need real world experiences. Everything can't live on a screen. Everything can't live in the imagination. There's got to be an outlet for actually creating and experiencing that firsthand, right? But Uranus and Pisces can bring incredible imagination, and very interesting ways of how we discuss things like consciousness and spirituality, how we deal with things like addiction and escapism. Again, goes to my point of probably a big part of the Uranus and Pisces are sober. That's probably for the best. They are rebelling in many ways against the old guard who, you know, for a long time, it was totally normal to kind of be a functioning alcoholic, you know, and they're changing the tone. They're like, they are switching it up. They are kind of rebelling against these certain escapisms and bringing like new ways of looking at health and spirituality and consciousness. The only other thing here is that because Uranus is extremely electrical and Pisces has to do with the consciousness itself, there can be sudden, if you are not grounded enough, okay, because all of your outer planets here, for most of you, I mean, a lot of you do have Neptune in Capricorn, or no, only a small portion, 2 years have Neptune in Capricorn, and only a small portion has Pluto in Capricorn. So the majority of you, as far as your outer planets here with your oversoul group, it is mostly fire and air, and then Uranus and Pisces. This can be psychosis. This can be breaks in actual conscious reality. This can be nervous system breakdowns. This can, like, it can lead, you have to stay very grounded. Like I said, this is my recommendation, is to focus on staying grounded in your lived experience and reality. Because if not, a lot of these placements bring you into a digital ether, imaginatory world that isn't necessarily grounded in reality. So for you guys, I think getting out in nature, again, lived experiences, grounding into your bodies, you know, really learning the practicalness of the mundane world will help anchor and allow these energies to really express the way they need to express. And finally, small portion of you guys between 2010 and 2012 have Uranus and Aries. So that is very prime for a lot of impulsivity, reckless behavior, conflict, kind of like randomly having bouts of like rage or conflict or being very, very aggressive. You guys should also be quite careful with your bodies if you're born within that subset. The best use of Uranus and Aries, right, in its shadow, it's a lot of rage, it's a lot of aggressiveness, and it can also be a deeply selfish energy where you want everything to be about you and always want to establish kind of your sense of independence, which is great. But the highest way to channel this, really, I think, is to find outlets for strong emotions. Maybe that's getting into things like martial arts. Maybe that's getting into things like marathon running, or, actively working out will really help your body. Again, Uranus is electrical and Aries is active. So you want to channel that. And the other thing is that you guys are going to find new creative ways in how to establish self-autonomy. in how to express oneself, and how to find what it is that makes you an individual. And so that small subset there has a very unique blueprint where they are here to basically experiment with self-identity and to find that within the world, but also to make sure that that you're not overpowering others, or, you know, being overly assertive to where it's demanding, or it's conflict prone, right? So you really want to channel that energy into body movement, sovereignty, really experimenting with yourself about how you claim your self-identity and about how you love yourself as well. So I think this group has a very dynamic blueprint, and this is why I think, you know, they're going through their own metamorphosis at this time. As far as the transits go, you guys aren't having anything like too crazy, except Pluto in Aquarius is going to conjunct your Neptunes in Aquarius. So those of you from 1998 to 2011, Pluto will be conjuncting your Neptune. Uranus in Aquarius, Pluto will also be conjuncting your Uranus. And for those of you who are the small set who have Uranus in Aries, 2010 to 2012, you have Saturn and Neptune conjuncting that Uranus. Okay. So you're getting hit pretty hard. Pluto and Sag, you're having a Uranus opposition. Uranus is in Gemini. Okay. So you guys are getting hit pretty hard in that sense. There's going to be a lot of new experiences that you have to develop your wisdom, to develop your worldview, to take in new information, and to allow the flexibility of changing what you believe. Okay, that's going to be a core part of it. And again, with Pluto and Aquarius, we are going to see the good, the bad, and the ugly of technology and community and humanity. And that's going to change the way that you view how you use those things, how you view what groups you are a part of, how you connect to other human beings. That is going to change with Pluto conjunct the Neptune and the Uranus. And for Saturn and Neptune, who's hitting on that Uranus and Aries, it's going to make you learn patience, dedication, structure, and again, how to channel that Aries energy in without imploding. Okay, without having outbursts, but really being able to channel it into autonomous action, inspired action, and leadership as well. So blessings to all the Gen Zs, and I will be back with my final video, which is going to be on the Gen Alphas.